May 20th. Eric Bledsoe, I hardly knew her. That was pretty bad, right? How about this one?
Well,
Eric Bledsoe,
try again.
that's what she said.
No.
Nailed it.
Mm.
Cut! Cut! Next take.
Anyways,
Oh,
ClipperBlog Live, the final ClipperBlog Live of this season. The Clippers fall to the San Antonio Spurs, Game 4 of the second round, 102-99. Here with our normal guest from Oceanside, DJ Foster.
anything. I'm better than normal, Andrew. That's rude.
Making his sophomore appearance, Brian Murphy.
Woo!
And calling in from the game, Jordan Heimer.
Hi.
DJ, let's start with you. How did you
All
think
right.
the effort was in this last game, in this final, in this ultimate Clipper game of the season?
I'm glad that we talked about it a little bit before we went on the air, but I'm glad that we ended with this game instead of last night. Last night just left such a bad taste in your mouth with the 24-0 run and just all the rotations and all of that. Tonight it was like Chris Paul looked like he was sort of back to normal. He had a great game, best game of his playoffs so far for him. And, it felt like they never quit, right? And that's the one, as we probably, hopefully, fingers crossed, moved on from the Vinny Del Negro era. That's the one thing you can say is that his team's always played hard. They don't play smart, but they always played hard. It was nice to see. I thought the ovation at the end of the game from the crowd was kind of a nice gesture. We have to remember that as much as we want to move on from the past, this is still Clippers team that's been in the playoffs, 3 times since I've been in LA. It still matters. They got out of the first round. I'm glad it ended the way it did tonight.
Jordan, how about you? What did you think?
Yeah, I think, look, they lost the second round playoff series. That was pretty much the mean of all the predictions that we all had before the season. And like DJ, I was impressed with the effort tonight, especially after they got down double digits early in the second quarter. This would have been a pretty easy game to just punt. You're down 3-0. There's never been a team to come back from 3-0 in the NBA playoffs. I'm pretty sure the Clippers on some level know it's not going to start with them against this San Antonio Spurs team. And they still really gave it everything they could to put the series back to Texas. I mean, we saw what there is to admire and look forward to about this team, which was kind of back-to-form performances from Chris Paul, from Blake Griffin in the third, another just scintillating fourth quarter from Eric Bledsoe. And we also saw, what drives us crazy about this team, which is critical plays where there doesn't seem to be any play calling or secondary option if Chris Paul can't buy space, on a really critical play right at the end of the game. You're reminded that Chris Paul is 5'11", 6 feet. And when your play seems to be Chris going to the paint and make something happen, well, that's not always going to work out. And defensively, 4 games went by, and the Clippers couldn't manage to come up with any adjustments, basically. The Spurs were getting just as many open looks in the corner tonight as they were yesterday in the first 2 games. They were just missing a few of them. And so to me, this was really just one of those classic, truth lies somewhere in between games. It was really validating in some ways, and it was also really validating of our concerns in others.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, after yesterday when they had the 24-0 run, and I know they had the 14-0 run 6 minutes into the game, and I couldn't help but think oh, are they really just going to kick it in right now? And the rest of the first quarter and the second quarter didn't look too good. And then they started to just turn it around, and that was very heartening. Blake was playing hard, got the tooth knocked through his lip, and then he kept on going. And Chris Paul played tough. There was a really unfortunate turnover in the last, I think that was 22 seconds that he turned the ball over when they could have taken the lead. And I was really hoping to have Lawler's Law break and it not work, and all of a sudden they're going to, like, win multiple games and, like, overtake the Spurs. And so it was a nice little fantasy moment, but, like, had they not played so well, like, even that, like, glimmer of hope wouldn't have been possible. Bledsoe played great. Nick Young had, like, the one, like, momentum three. They still struggle against, no surprise the team struggles against Tim Duncan, but I don't know. Like, it was... Like, there's also, like, I hate to, like, admit this, but there's also a little part of me that was like, it might be good if they don't win, just because, like, I was worried about the injuries to, like, Blake's knee and Chris Paul's hip, and it's like, if they go to more games, then they got a lot to win, and it just seemed like this was almost the best outcome, so that they go into the offseason and, fingers crossed, they figure out what to do with coaching and they get some real help and they come out with a team that has really grown from this experience. And I still think this is a team that could do really well next year.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Breen, on that injury standpoint, because you know that Chris Paul and possibly Blake Griffin are going to play on the Olympic team this summer. They're not going to get a lot of time off. You kind of want them to get as much rest as possible to not further exacerbate their current injuries, especially if they had won this one and then somehow miraculously won Game 5 in San Antonio and everyone's starting to talk, oh, the Clippers were breaking records in fourth quarter comebacks in round one. Maybe they'll be the first team to come back down 0-3 in the NBA. It would have been nice to see, but at the same time, you don't want these guys to have lingering injuries carrying over from this season to the next. Going back to the game for a moment, though, DJ, what did you think of the insane small ball lineups that Vinny was trotting out there? There was a 3-yard lineup at one point. Bobby Simmons played some power forward, the first Bobby Simmons sighting since Game 2 of the first round. And then I think at one point in crunch time in the fourth quarter, we had a 4-guard lineup where it was 3 point guards and then Randy Foye, a combo guard, playing the 4. What did you think of that?
It's like the old school Villanova days where Randy Foye used to play 4. A little different when you have 6'8", 6'9" Kawhi Leonard you're supposed to cover. Honestly, I don't care how small they go as long as Bledsoe is in the game. That's all I care about at this point. How many times does he have to have games like this? Obviously, there's no games left to play, but how many times did he have to perform defensively and just get over every screen and just create havoc and before Vinny would play him consistently? Why is Eric Bledsoe not playing 32, 34 minutes a night? Why isn't he getting starters minutes? It doesn't make any sense.
And why down the stretch, after Eric Bledsoe has shown for 5 games that he's not just a novelty, he's not just a pace changer or a defensive specialist, that he can get basically any place he wanted to get on the floor tonight with his dribble, hit a couple mid-range shots, hit a 3. All that being said, plus the fact that, of course, any offensive possession could end with a turnover and all of a sudden you're on defense in transition, why are you substituting in Mo Williams' offense for defense with Bledsoe in the last 2 minutes? Like, that to me is just such an example of that kind of simplistic thinking Charlie Widows was talking about yesterday on CBL, where it's like, oh, we're down 2 points, Mo Williams shoot baskets, Mo Williams play game. Or it's like, oh, but there are all these other reasons why he's terrible compared to Bledsoe in this spot. And, sure enough, Mo Williams is put in for Bledsoe with under a minute left, and Mo airballs the shot on the possession. To which my response was like, oh, well, Bledsoe could have airballed that.
Right.
Give him a chance.
He had scored, 10 points in like a 3-minute time period or something crazy like that?
I think it was 12, but yeah, it was. He just went off.
You don't offense-defense switch a guy that has just scored 10 points. Like, on what planet is that an acceptable decision? It's frustrating.
What really scares me, and I know we can get into horror fantasies later on in the podcast, and we're still recapping the game, but what really scares me is that could this guy be undervalued enough that one of the other coaches around the league who must be salivating, having watched Bledsoe's emergence this playoffs, could we wake up one day this offseason and discover that Bledsoe's been traded for, a couple of nice pieces, but nothing really special. I
don't think so.
worry.
Jordan, I don't think that's something you need to worry about, because Bledsoe was clearly a gem for Neil Olshey, who like hounded the Thunder to get him. And for him to get Sterling to just buy a pick clearly shows how important he is to Olshey, and Olshey has talked like incessantly about him. The bigger picture is, or not the bigger picture, the smaller picture is Vinny Del Negro, who, I mean, I think he's got this chemistry thing where he doesn't want to like shake up the lineups too much. But the thing that was so frustrating for me was that Bledsoe really solved one of my gigantic concerns with this Clipper team, which was perimeter defense, and he was awesome on the perimeter. And it's so frustrating to have somebody go like, this guy solves this problem clearly, and to not see him get nearly enough minutes to be as effective as the Clippers needed him to be to win.
Yeah, I think an important, as far as talking about Bledsoe as a trade piece now, it would have to be in a huge deal, I think. And I agree, Breen, with everything you said about Olshey, but like we mentioned on the show yesterday, Olshey isn't under contract. We don't know if he's going to be here or not at this point. So if another GM comes in and says, hey, Chris Paul is 6 feet tall, Eric Bledsoe is 6 feet tall, I can't possibly pay them together, or I don't want them together for long stretches, even though that doesn't make sense. You obviously can. And maybe he looks to upgrade somewhere else, or I don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty with Bledsoe going into the next season, I think.
Well, I think the one benefit of even possibly a new GM saying that they wouldn't be able to play Chris Paul and Eric Bledsoe together is that Boston basically did this. I understand that Rondo is a bigger point guard, but They did play Rondo and Avery Bradley for large chunks of their season, and it was pretty successful, I thought. So there is another team in the league that is exploring this kind of 2 point guard style lineup, and they've had reasonable success with it. So you could think that maybe the Clippers would have success with that lineup as well. Jordan, I want to go back to something you had said about possibly Bledsoe's value going up enough to get traded for nice players. Just for a frame of reference, can you name a couple of players that you would say would be okay complementary players, but not someone that you would trade Eric Bledsoe for?
Well, this isn't someone who's actually available for trade because I believe he's a restricted free agent, but during the Grizzlies series, I was sitting next to a few writers who were discussing Maurice Spates. And there's an example of a guy who, he's a good player. He's a good piece. I would love to have Maurice Spates coming off the bench as my first or second big. A guy who's tough, grabs boards, stretches the floor, hits an 18-foot jump shot. I love that guy. But do I want a guy like that and even 1 or 2 more other guys like that packaged in a deal for Eric Bledsoe? No. Because along with everyone else on this broadcast, we believe that what we saw in the last 5 days was elite talent. Like, he just did things flat out that speak to a raw talent that is simply, not one of a kind, but we're talking about 5 or 10 guys in the league who could do some of the things and showcase the range of talents that he showed us in the last 5 days. So I guess that's what I mean. I don't want to wake up and discover we have 3 Maurice Spateses instead of 1 Eric Bledsoe.
3 Maurice Spateses. You can only get them at Costco, right?
What about 8 Spates?
That's actually a new slowcore band I'm starting. 3 Maurice Spaces.
Okay, let's bring this back towards this last game for a little bit longer. What do you guys think of DeAndre Jordan's plays? Played pretty well. Something that we were hoping that we'd get an entire series of, but he did definitely show up in the last game. DJ, what do you think?
You know what I was thinking about when I was watching DeAndre play was that I was looking across the way at Tiago Splitter, who may be one of the least coordinated and skilled players in basketball, and I mean that. He is truly awful. But he is part of a system that utilizes, he is a large human being, he is somewhat fast, and he just streaks down the middle of the floor on pick and rolls or just slips picks, and he can sometimes finish at the rim, right? Isn't that DeAndre Jordan? Isn't his baseline the lowest he could possibly be in a good system is Tiago Splitter, right? I mean, Splitter's a pretty good defender, but I don't know. It just makes me think that DeAndre is being wasted a little bit, and he's had some truly awful games throughout the season. He's still very inconsistent, um, but I think in a good system with the right coach and the right development guys, he can still be a very good player in the league.
DJ, do you think that it has to be a specific coach in a specific system, or can it be any replacement level coach in any system?
I mean, it can't be anybody. There's a lot of bad coaches out there.
Like if we like rank the NBA coaches from 1 to 30, and we just took any coach from, let's say, like 12 to 16.
I mean, it just depends on who it is. I get what you're saying though. Yeah, I think a decent defensive coach, like go get Budenholzer or however you say his name, the Spurs assistant. I bet
Or
you
even
he
like
could.
Nate McMillan.
Yeah, I bet you they could figure out how to use DeAndre. And I think one thing we have to look at when we're grading DeAndre as well is that he is playing next to a truly awful defensive power forward in Blake Griffin. And so that backline defense is a mess a lot of times because DeAndre is either trying to do too much or is too worried that he doesn't have help behind him. And I don't know, the degree of difficulty for DeAndre, I think is much larger than it should be for, a 7-footer with all these athletic abilities.
You're right, and that point about Blake is such a good one because I think there were a lot of times in the playoffs where it was easy for announcers to say, oh, the reason Kenny Martin's in right now is because Vinny doesn't trust DeAndre Jordan in a key spot. And there's a lot of truth to that. But another way of looking at that is when you're playing with Blake Griffin, who makes all these mistakes, doesn't close out, often slow in rotations, you need somebody like Kenyon Martin who basically his basketball brain is on a level where he's not just processing what should happen, he's processing what's not happening and making up for those errors, in the way he's moving and trying to cover often, half the court by himself. You can't expect DeAndre to have that kind of basketball IQ. That's a veteran's ability to have seen a million situations a million times and adapt to them. So, yeah, if DeAndre's going to be playing with Blake, again, to come back to the same point, you need to do everything you can do to get those guys the help they need to develop into a coherent backline defensive unit.
Well, I don't want to steal thunder from Arnovitz, so I'm going to give him credit. But one of the things he was like, what would happen if like Stan Van Gundy was the coach for this team? Like a guy who's a fantastic defensive coach who knows how to work with, an athletic big who has bad defensive fours around him. Like, what would he do? I think there's tremendous opportunity for this team to get like significantly better defensively. It just didn't happen this year.
Yeah, it's very weird too, considering that they had so many new pieces, and people talked about, oh, the team needs to gel together. But the two starters that were here last year was Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan. So you think they would have been the most familiar in whatever defensive scheme that the Clippers had set up, but they by far looked the most lost out of all the starters defensively for the entire year. I do want to point out, though, because there are a lot of commenters at the bottom of the ClipperBlog section and various places. I think TJ Simers wrote an article kind of bashing DeAndre today. If you look up his statistics every year next to Tyson Chandler, and Tyson Chandler has been often the model or the bar set for DeAndre, they're surprisingly similar through this level, and people kind of forget that Tyson was a work in progress his first few years in the league, and it wasn't until he got traded from Chicago to New Orleans that he really started to develop into this defensive presence that he is today. Just my 2 cents on that.
Right, no, I agree.
And I
think...
guess
No, go ahead,
I
go
was
ahead.
doing a quick follow, DJ, where I was going to say, someone tweeted today, DeAndre's per 36 minutes, in other words, starters minutes, stats for the first half of the playoffs. And they were surprisingly decent. They were like 13 or 14 points, 10 or 11 rebounds, 3 or 4 blocks. And then it was a precipitous fall off into his second half stats. And to me, that's another thing I read into as coaching. Because DeAndre Jordan, to me, clearly is in shape. I don't ever see him winded. I don't ever see him like Blake leaning on his hands on knees a lot. But to me, that's just a clear example of like, well, the Clippers are the team doing none of the adjustment during halftime. And so all of these guys who kind of need that extra advantage of the right adjustment or the right coaching at halftime, instead are being taken advantage of in these third quarter runs that the Clippers keep allowing. Anyway.
I think the one thing that they did better tonight, as far as adjustments goes, I thought they did a decent job of chasing the Spurs shooters at least off the line and making them pull up for wide open long twos. Happened quite a few times. I know Danny Green had a wide open shot from the free throw line. They were chasing Bonner off and making him settle for, the 18, 19 footers. I thought that was a good adjustment, but I think when we're looking at the future with DeAndre, the perimeter defenders can do that sort of thing as long as they have the faith that the guys behind them are going to pick up the slack for them. And that's my big thing with defense, is that it's so much about trust and making a play that isn't going to make you look good, but is part of a defensive system. And I think with the right coach, like you said with Stan Van Gundy, Turkoglu, Rashard Lewis, these guys are not good defenders, not by any stretch of the imagination, but Stan made it work in large part, yes, because he has one of the best defensive players to ever play in Dwight Howard, but also because he developed a system around his talent. So I don't know. I'm hopeful that with the right coach, and there's a lot of good, smart defensive assistants out there that could be up for the job, this team could turn into a really good defensive team, especially with Bledsoe. He might be one of the best, we're talking about in 2-3 years, one of the best perimeter defenders in the game.
There's a Twitter comment here from J.R. Aiken, and Breen, DJ, you guys saw the same telecast on TNT, and I didn't see this, so I'm assuming you guys didn't. So, Jordan, this is really just a question for you. He said that Kenyon Martin refused to go back into the game at some point, and Vinny angrily asked Kmart if he wanted to play, and Kmart directly said no. Did you notice anything like that?
No, I was sitting on the opposite side of the court from that. I didn't notice that at all. I'm sorry, I can't illuminate that at all. That's really stunning if that happened.
It is pretty odd, but that is a somewhat logical explanation as to why DeAndre got 31 minutes when the most before he got was like 23. So
I guess the part that doesn't seem logical, and I know we're debating a hypothetical, it either happened or it didn't, but Kenyon Martin has been a guy who sometimes those huddles actually have gathered around him in the playoffs, and that is something I've noticed. I've noticed Kenyon leading huddles. He's been absolutely a vocal leader for the Clippers. It seems, if that did happen, I guess I'm very curious to know what precipitated that. What happened that made Kenyon turn off?
yeah, it's a curious instance that he's presenting there. What else? What are we missing from this game? Anything you guys want to discuss left in this game, Jordan?
No, the game was such a microcosm of, like I said in the beginning, both what's great about this team, but also the frustrations. Even though this was a close game, even though it was an exciting game, it was still a game where the Clippers had no way of creating easy baskets. We've talked about how they don't have a system defensively. We haven't really talked tonight yet about how, they don't really have a system offensively either. They were losing in the first half, and actually they should have been losing worse, because basically like 80% of their possessions were ending up in like rushed mid-range jump shots. They just happened to make just enough to stay in the game. Mo Williams or Randy Foy or Karan or what have you. And then in the third quarter, Blake went Blake on everybody, and then in the fourth quarter, Bledsoe and Paul went Bledsoe and Paul. But you can see there's no point during the game where you're like, oh, well, that was the quarter where the offense ran smoothly, generated open looks, and they knocked down shots. Like, that just didn't happen again. And so, we harp on these things, we hit them over and over again, but it's because we're at a point in the season where there's nothing new to discover. This is a team that is not limited by its talent, but by how that talent's being underutilized. And I thought this game had plenty of examples of that once again.
We discussed on ClipperBlog Live last night after the game that I think, DJ, you were the one that pointed out just play DeAndre for 35 minutes and play Bledsoe for 35. Just do something else and let us see something. And you could prove us wrong that the numbers didn't pan out to theory, which obviously they did because Bledsoe was great and DeAndre was decent. I was kind of happy to see that there was an adjustment to be made, that he didn't go with that starting unit forever. And even though it's very odd to see Bobby Simmons play power forward and then 4 point guards come out for the crunch time, it was reasonably effective in comparison to everything else the Clippers have done, mostly because Matt Bonner and Boris Diaw playing the 4 are not going to post up anyone on the Clippers and just bang bodies down low. It was an outside shooting team that, for whatever reason, the Clippers decided to play as conventionally as possible. So just the fact that, yes, it took Vinny Del Negro 4 games to make an adjustment, but that he did make an adjustment, that was kind of nice, I thought.
Yeah, when he's on the golf course next year, he'll remember this game fondly.
Can we talk a little bit about just like how good Tim Duncan is? Because like it seemed like every single like run the Clippers went on, and they went on a handful because they were gutty and they were coming back and they weren't giving in. Tim Duncan would just have like a little runner. He would have like one of his 18-footers. Like he didn't go to his left block bank shot all the time, but it's just like he always seemed to have an answer and was so calm and so steady and played not quite vintage Tim Duncan, but really well. I mean, and it was just really impressive to see a guy this late in his career just handle business. I was really impressed by Tim Duncan tonight. So,
yeah, people keep thinking he's going to fall off, and if you look at his per 36 numbers the last few years, they're like right around his career averages. He's still incredible. Maybe he doesn't pass the eye test, but production-wise, he's every bit as good as he's always been, which is scary to think about. Big men don't age like this.
Yeah, and that's a credit to Popovich.
Yeah.
I mean, because Popovich was smart enough to go, hey, we have this condensed 66-game season. What we're going to do, Timmy, is you're not going to play your normal minutes. You're not going to get your normal numbers, but you're going to play like you always play, and you're going to get to the postseason, and we're just going to absolutely dominate. And they've been crushing people. It's like, I mean, it was one of those things that all the writers and even like the talking heads were talking about how getting your stars rest would be really important. And I think the amazing thing was Popovich was able to still win over 50 games, like resting his starters and keeping them fresh. Like Tim Duncan just it looked easy for him. And I don't know, that's just such an impressive organization, Popovich and Duncan. And go read the Chris Ballard article on Sports Illustrated if you haven't already. Like that, it's I don't know. I'm a huge admirer of that that team.
I was thinking about it tonight during the game, and I know everyone is kind of catching up. Like, wow, we've really undervalued the Spurs, and these guys are incredible. But is it possible that even while we're saying those things, we're still undervaluing them? Like, historically, this could end up as one of the greatest playoff teams ever, right?
Yeah, like right up
the first 2 rounds, haven't lost since April. Like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's like... Yeah. Go
Sorry,
ahead,
I don't know, Breen, if we're undervaluing them still, but I will say it cannot be pointed out enough how many guys they have on that team that are scrap heap guys. We talk about the Clippers goon squad not being, great and being limited and having one thing. Bonner was the 11th man on the Raptors. Diaw was cut by the Bobcats. Thiago Splitter, late first-round pick. Green, and it's really unbelievable. And for them to be this great, and then to look at their talent and go, we're in the playoffs where some of the big stories are benches that didn't come together. A Miami bench that's full of names like Battier and Mike Miller that can't get anything out of their team. And so for the Spurs to be this great, and for it to be this much just a product of system and plan and development, you just can't emphasize enough what an amazing accomplishment it is, I think.
Yeah, I almost feel like this is like they're a team that is like a really good writer for like a plot-driven story where like they have like these characters that just have this one thing and they're not like full characters. They're just like these characters that just one thing. Like Gary Neal, he makes his 3-pointers. You know, he's not that great a ball handler, but like he just drills them. You know, and you have Boris Diaw, and you know he's their passing guy, and like in the post, and they have everything revolves around Tim Duncan, the superstar, and Tony Parker, like you know the wingman. It's just like it all like forms around, and it's like when you think about it, it's so simple, but it's just such a complex thing that they have, you know, just worked out.
Yeah, they're just so incredible. I guess we talked about this a little bit. How easy are they to emulate, right? I mean, you have to have so many things working in your favor. Great coaching staff, obviously. Fantastic player personnel. The player development guys. Like it's a tough thing to emulate, but ultimately, if you're going to go the star model, which the Clippers have, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and hey, maybe Bledsoe is your Harden or your Ginobili. We're obviously getting a little out of hand with the Bledsoe love at this point, but maybe he's the third guy, and then you just, instead of overpaying for Caron Butlers in the future, 32-year-olds, $8 million. If you focus on developing that system, then you can bring in the Danny Greens of the world and make them. And I think Stan Van Gundy is right there with Popovich in being able to do that, of turn single talented players, like you were saying, Breen, into something more. I think, gosh, I just wish that Sterling wasn't the owner of this team.
Yeah.
Because then you bring in Van
I think
Gundy,
that's
no
a big
problem.
point, DJ, because the hardest part to institute about a system like that is for guys coming in to know this is not negotiable. I have been brought in to play a role, and if I don't play that role, I'll be gone, because Popovich and Duncan, that's the team. Those guys will be there. Belichick and Brady, Bobby Cox and Chipper Jones, whatever. Like, that's the system, and you either come in and do what they ask you to do, or you won't be on the team very long. And when you have Donald Sterling and Vinny Del Negro, how is a player going to take that seriously? How is a player going to say, yeah, of course I'm going to do what you're asking me to do, because the system is the thing. It's bigger than any of us.
Right, and just naming those stars that you just listed off, I think it would help if the stars were held accountable. I don't think Blake Griffin is being held accountable. I think he's a much better defensive player than this. I think he has games where he frankly looks like he doesn't give an F on the defensive end with his rotations and just his general effort. So I think that's a big part of it. They're always talking about how Popovich can get on Duncan and yell at him, and Duncan will take it. I don't know how much Vinny Del Negro gets on Griffin. Have you guys ever seen an instance? I mean, I've been in the Clippers practices. I've been lucky enough to have that access. And I can't really remember a time where Vinny got in Blake's face and said, you need to do this, you need to do that. What the heck is that? And I think that's a huge part of both Blake's development and how far this franchise can go. He needs to start being held accountable, I think.
Yeah.
You're totally right. There needs to be somebody who can say to Blake Griffin, hey, Blake, you're a great power forward, but look around this league. There are not a whole lot of power forwards, excepting the guys like Dirk Nowitzki, who can basically create shots like any great wing player, who aren't also excellent defenders if they're going to lead their team to a championship. That's a fact. That's just not a model of a championship player. A power forward that leads your team in scoring and can't play any defense. And that's your go-to, your option. But you're right. They need that person who's going to have that conversation with Blake.
I was hoping that was going to be Chris Paul at first, and then, but like I thought Chris Paul was going to be the guy who was going to like stick his finger right in Blake's chest and be like, "You need to play defense right now." And I think you saw some of that, but I wonder if maybe having Chauncey Billups on the team didn't dissolve a little of that. A little bit of that leadership from Chris Paul, like right in the beginning of the year, because he was so Chris Paul was so deferential to Billups in the beginning that I almost feel like this team needed to be Chris Paul's right from the start. It needed to be to really have Paul be the ambassador of this team and be the guy that gets on everybody and is the coach on the floor. And he did that really well during the course of the season, but I almost feel like there's one more level that he could have done. And that wouldn't be as effective as a coach doing it, but that would have been able to get Blake to play a little bit better. And with Chauncey's injury, maybe Chris Paul has that opportunity to do next year.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that's an excellent point about Chauncey just taking some of that by way of age. Even Chris Paul's 26 years old. It's hard for him to. I mean, with Blake, the younger guys, yeah, but it's hard to go to 32-year-old Kenyon Martin and be like, look, here's the deal, right? I mean, I don't want to go to I can be 54 years old. I don't want to get my finger in Kenyon Martin's, chest. So I get it.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that, not that you're being too hard on Blake, but some of this criticism is a little I mean, all year long, everyone's been saying Blake doesn't have any post moves, he doesn't have an outside shot, he doesn't have a mid-range game, he doesn't play defense, and part of me feels like the compressed schedule, no training camp, literally no practice since All-Star Weekend, I think, has really affected what he can and can't do. And you'd see him out there trying hard, but he just, like you guys said earlier, he doesn't have the veteran knowledge. He hasn't built up that NBA IQ to be able to do a lot of the things that you kind of want him to do. And so it feels like this season is almost just an extension of his rookie year. Like, good job, Blake. Your numbers were relatively consistent, and you did a good job. There wasn't really much development, but it was laughable that everyone was saying that is Kevin Love or Blake Griffin the best power forward last year, and Kevin Love makes a huge leap and Blake doesn't. Blake hasn't really had that time, so maybe at the end of next year, a lot of these criticisms will be more valid.
Well, I think you should separate between two things. Like, the criticisms that Blake doesn't have a post game, I think, are pretty unfounded. Does he have a pretty post game? No, he does not. He has a really ugly post game.
And by the way, Brian, what always kills me about that is, name me 5 pretty post games in the NBA right now. Like, what big guys are people talking about when they're like, where's the post game? Where are the 6 post moves? Like, I don't know. Ask Akeem Olajuwon. Other than that, who are you talking about? Anyway, sorry to interrupt, but that one particularly.
No, I mean, I think there are like a handful of power forwards and centers that do have post games, and I don't even think Blake is that far down the list. I mean, I think there are guys like, obviously Duncan who played, and you have LaMarcus Aldridge is pretty solid. It's a little bit more of that.
No, LaMarcus Aldridge has 1 post move.
No, but you have like Powell and Bynum. Like, there are, like, I would say even Dwight.
Bynum has 2 moves. He has a move and a counter. I say Blake has the 4th or 5th best post moves in the NBA already. This is one that, I don't know. I don't know how valid it is.
But
we're
on the same side here. But going back to Andrew's point of this being unfair criticism, Kevin Love had a shortened season too, and he made dramatic progress with his defense.
Kevin Love is in the 4th year of his NBA career, and this is Blake's 2nd year.
Yeah, but you were talking about from last year to this year,
Right.
And it's still 1 year, and still they're about the same age, and Blake has had a little bit more time because he came into the league and watched all guys like Marcus Camby play. Like, he has that knowledge base, and while I think his free throws are a result of him changing his shot from last year to this year, and I think over the summer that will improve. I'm not that worried about it. But defense, I did not see him trying hard, which I felt like I started to see at the end of last year. That was one of the things I was so excited about Blake last year. Like, you saw his free throws improve over the course of the year. You saw his shot improve. You saw him start to play a little bit better defense, like pick up and transition. Like, I was so excited about this year, and he regressed on defense. It wasn't even like he didn't improve. He got worse, and that's what bothers me.
I think one little nugget, going back to Blake, that I saw on Twitter today, David Thorpe, who's ESPN, works with tons of players over the summer, great development guy. Somebody asked him on Twitter how many shots, what kind of shot regimen Blake Griffin needs to be on in the summer, like how many shots does he need to take? Mm-hmm. And he said it won't matter because his shot's broken. And until he fixes it, it doesn't matter how many shots he shoots like that. I just thought that was a really interesting take, is that maybe a new coach comes in and wants to restructure Blake's shot after 2 years, and I don't know. It's crazy to think about.
I think
I've heard Thorpe say that before, but I just don't know. I've heard I think he actually said it on the podcast when we had him on. But on the other hand, like, Blake for a power forward was top 6 in the league in percentage of 16-foot shots and further after the All-Star break. So,
Right.
again, to me, this is one of those things where the conventional wisdom actually doesn't fit the statistics. I mean, how could his shot be broken? He was hitting 42% of a very difficult shot for a sustained period of time. I don't know. That doesn't mesh for me.
Yeah, I'm with Jordan on this because I mean I think he still does need to work on his shot, but I don't think it's necessarily broken in the same way that Thorpe is, and that's a huge, like, I guess it's a crazy thing to say, to disagree with a guy that works with so many people. But I think so much of it is just rhythm and confidence, like, and the shot fundamentals are meant to like be grooved in such a way that you get in the quote unquote right places as frequently as possible. But I mean, I remember, you know, being at UCLA and watching Cedric Bozeman like have hot streaks, and like that guy had one of the ugliest shots I've ever seen. Like Sean Marion is a great 3-point, like has had great 3-point shooting, like, and he like might have the ugliest, I don't even know what kind of shot, like he shoots it from like, underneath his neck and like flicks it, like, and obviously he can get it done. Like Blake can get it done. It's just, I do think that repetition is like what will make him successful. I would like him to be, you know, shooting in the most correct way possible, but I mean, you can have ridiculous things. Like, it's not just like basketball where you need correct fundamentals. Like golf is one of the most precise games you have, and you have Jim Furyk who's looping all over the place, you know, and like it's about grooving something that like gets a specific result time in and time out, and he just needs to groove it.
Just on the topic of David Thorpe saying that Blake has a broken shot, I'm assuming that Thorpe is referring to that hitch that Blake has at the top of his shooting form. And I'm sure all of you guys have been around the Clippers in some capacity, or like just maybe as a fan at a game, or DJ, I know you were with them last year. In practice, do you notice that hitch is there? Because when you watch the pre-games and you see him shooting free throws, or you see like random practice backstage access footage, I don't see that hitch at all in his shot. It's only when he's in game. Is it just like a mental thing? DJ, do you know?
No, it's there. The hitch is there. I think the difference is the hesitation. Because in practice, it's just boom, 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 boom. When he gets it in a game, he tends to hesitate. And so I think that's the big difference. There's a hesitation and a hitch in game. In practice, there's just the hitch at the top. So it's going back to a little bit on his post game. I wanted to add this. I don't think it's ever going to be conventional, and that's okay as long as it's under control. That's my big thing with Blake, is that he's got feet flying around everywhere, and he's just kind of, you know, making it up as he goes along, and then he'll have moments where he makes a great up and under, and like a beautiful move that's under control, and he keeps his feet on the ground, and he's never going to be a guy that goes boom, jump hook left, you know, jump hook right. He doesn't have long arms. He's not taller than everybody. That's never going to happen. So I think it's fine that his post game is unconventional as long as it's under control.
Okay. We are kind of approaching the end of this final end of season podcast, but let's play a little game. It's the last game of the season. It's like the end of school, and we're sending all the players out for their summer assignments, things that they need to improve. Blake Griffin comes up to you and says, "Guys, what do I need to do? What do you want to see when I come back this next season?" DJ, what do you want to see him improve on? It's one summer, so say everything.
I want to see you work with DeAndre Jordan on your backline rotations. It's every good defensive team has whether it's Chicago, Boston, Miami, I mean, whoever it is, has a strong backline, right? And so I guess I don't know how you practice that without it being in games, but that's what I want him to focus on. I want him to make the difference on the defensive end.
Jordan, what do you think Blake should be focusing on?
You know, very similar. I think we're talking about two almost different sets of issues. There's muscle memory issues, and I have really no doubt from being around Blake a little bit and listening to other people who are around him a lot more, that that's the kind of thing he's very good at committing to. You know, he's a gym rat. He's going to get in the gym and shoot his 1,000 shots and shoot his 1,000 free throws. Defense is a different issue. You know, that is a matter of you just have to commit. You know, if any of you have played basketball, and I'm a terrible basketball player, but defense is just commitment to willing your body to keep moving, to keep running at that guy, to just keep throwing your body where it has to be, even though your body's telling you, maybe I could just take this off. Maybe I don't have to force my body to speed up and slow down again. And that's just not something you see from Blake consistently on the defensive end. And I think until you see that, there's always going to be something. He's never going to come close to tapping his full potential as a two-way player. You know, he does have short arms. He's never going to be a huge shot blocker. But his rookie year, he was actually top 10 in the league in charges taken. And he dropped to like 50th or 60th this year. And to me, that's a profound little insight into a guy who is moving less, who is trying less to do everything he can do on the defensive end. Maybe it's to save his body a little bit. I get that. That makes sense. But I'd like to see him obviously bring it back to that level of activity that he was approaching last year.
Breen.
Defense next.
Defense next. Okay, so everyone says offense be damned. Just the defense for Blake. DeAndre Jordan. He will 99% be back next year. DJ, what do you want him to focus on?
I want him to work on his future telling abilities. What's that called? Premonition? Is that the word I'm looking for?
Yep.
I want him to work on that because I feel like he's such a reactionary player, and he doesn't really think 2 or 3 steps ahead. And to be a great defensive center or even a very good one, you have to see things developing before they even happen. And like you were talking about with Kmart, that's one of his better strengths, is accounting for those, for those errors that the guys around him are going to make. So again, I don't really know. Could we get him with a psychic over the summer and maybe a psychic and a psychologist? That's what I want for DeAndre.
Breen, what do you think?
Oh, sorry.
I want him to focus on focusing. He just spaces, I want to get him some Adderall and the playbooks of other teams and just stick him out in a room and just go, read this, take this, figure everything out. And because he's when he's tuned in, he can actually I've seen him play really good defense on Kevin Garnett and been like, wow, DeAndre could be awesome. And then I see him get schooled by Brandon Bass, who's the same height as Kobe Bryant, and he's just schooling him. And I just want him to be focused.
Jordan?
A few times this year, DeAndre would actually stun everybody by throwing a post move down in the game. He basically has 2 of them. I've seen him working on them every day, 2 hours before the game with Ivaroni. He bangs up Ivaroni, he has these 2 little moves, and I would say he's the guy, not Blake, where I would say you need 1 post move from each block and a counter, because he has to be able to help Blake out in terms of drawing a little bit of a defense, because he's so useless on offense other than looking for lobs that it just makes Blake's life that much harder. And these things in basketball and other sports are all so integrated. The harder Blake has to work on offense, the less energy he is going to expend on defense. And so for DeAndre to kind of help this team comprehensively, he needs to be able to do 2 or 3 things on offense and not half a thing.
Okay. I think the one thing that I would like to see DeAndre do is just move his body better for rebounding. It seems like he really both he and Blake are kind of victims to this. I guess they're very handsy with the rebounds. They don't really try and put their body in the right position. They just try and use, well, in DeAndre's case, his very long arms to try and out-arm everybody, out-length people, if that's a thing. to get the rebounds. So I would like to see him just do that. That'd be like maybe tie his arms down and try and get a rebound without his arms. That'd be nice.
That's like the cookie on the face for Dwight.
Let's see here. Chris Paul, he can just come back next year. See you next year, Chris Paul.
Have a good summer, Chris.
Get help.
Get healthy. Get healthy.
Right. Who else will be under contract? Caron Butler. Caron Butler, go to Germany. Come back. See you next year.
Yep.
Perfect.
Eric Bledsoe. Is there anything that you guys want to see from Eric Bledsoe, Jordan?
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by the fact that he hit 3 corner threes in this series. Obviously, he's already working on it. Keep up the good work, Eric. Keep hitting that. And the more that he can space the court, all of a sudden he goes from being valuable to, honestly, his ceiling is off the charts if he can hit that shot.
Green?
I want him to be able to find sort of middle grounds. Like, I feel like when he's playing, it's like 50% speed or 100% speed. And on defense, it's awesome because he just goes, I'm playing 100%, and he just wrecks havoc. But on offense, I think he needs to be able to just recognize pace a little bit better. And, yeah, I think that's it. You know, just be able a little bit more under control.
For me, it's continue to learn from Chris Paul. We saw him pick up a lot of things that Chris Paul does, even the, stopping and letting a big man run up his back, or, working his way through the lane and getting a little floater. That's vintage Chris Paul. It's so fun because Paul is, he's not as fast as he once was, and he can't move quite like he used to in the New Orleans days. But here's Bledsoe, who has all this raw athletic ability and everything that Chris Paul had when he came into the league. So it's almost a chance for Paul to see, someone carry out his vision, his original vision for his career. Because Paul went from Isaiah Thomas to John Stockton, right? So I don't know. I think it'll be fun to watch those two grow together. So wherever Chris Paul goes, I want Eric Bledsoe 4 steps behind with a giant notepad, just writing things down.
Sorry, that's a very funny image.
And mumbling in his little accent. Like, oh,
Yes.
Yeah, there we go, Chris.
I think that's it, right? No one else on Trey Tompkins will be back next year. I guess he just gets...
Keep on chucking.
Yep.
Put on 20 pounds of muscle.
Yeah, there
Trey,
we go.
put on 20 pounds, and you're going to be an incredibly valuable rotation player.
20 pounds. Let's make sure that he doesn't get any steroid testing or anything then. So that's a lot of muscle to put on.
Yeah, just like HGH or whatever they don't test for these days.
That's right. There's always something.
This is a very drug-heavy session. We got Adderall and HGH. We gotta watch what's going on.
We gotta be careful. The kids listening at home, don't do these things. You end up in a basement blogging for your whole life.
All right. So that is going to wrap it for the last post-game show of the season.
What are you?
Stay tuned. In the off-season, potentially we'll be having off-season roster discussions, draft discussions, trade discussions, and if we can get everyone on, maybe drug discussions every now and again. So
I can't wait to see who the Clippers are going to take in the first round. It'll be exciting.
For DJ Foster, Green Murphy, Jordan Heimer, I'm Andrew Hahn. Thanks for tuning in this season.